Hello students, this is me Kiran Chaudhary, your biology faculty at Infinity Learn by Sri Chaitanya. Welcome you all in today's session students. Today we will discuss about agents of pollination. Let me tell you what we covered in our last class. It was about pollination, right? So today's objective or the objective of today's class is to study agents of pollination. I hope you all are ready, right? So let us start the class. The first thing that I want to discuss with you is what are the types of agents that can participate in pollination process, right? So broadly speaking students, these agents of pollination can be divided into two categories depending upon whether they are living or non-living in nature, right? So here is the categorization where you can see that agents are subdivided into two broad categories, abiotic agents and biotic agents. So as the name suggests, abiotic agents are those agents which will be non-living in nature, right? Example, wind and water. Talking about biotic agents, so plants actually uses various biotic agents for bringing pollination, right? So what can be? If I talk about biotic agents, plants can use insects, right? Specifically talking about animals, plants can use insects, plant can even use larger animals, not only the smaller ones, right? So when I am going to come on this biotic agents part, then I will tell you exactly what are the various types of biotic agents plant uses for pollination, right? So till now what you got to understand is plant can use biotic as well as abiotic agents for pollination, right? Next I want to ask one question over here, right? So listen carefully. What do you think? Plant uses biotic agents more or abiotic? Which is the most common agent of pollination seen in flowering plant? Anyone? Just give it a thought. Try to think and give me an answer. I am waiting for your response students. Try to think and give answer. Plants mostly uses which pollinating agent? Anyone? Hello Sunil. Can you tell me Sunil? Plants uses biotic or abiotic agents of pollination mostly? Any response? Anything? Yes. So let me tell you students, flowering plants actually uses biotic agents of pollination mostly, right? So in majority of the flowering plants, biotic agents are seen as flowering or pollinating agents. Clear? Now next is I want to tell you some facts about abiotic pollinating agents. Listen carefully. When we talk about abiotic agents, we basically talk about wind, that is air, and water. In wind and water, can you tell me which one is more common or mostly used by plants when it comes to abiotic agents? Anyone? Give it a try. Yes. So it is what? It is wind. So wind among abiotic agents, wind is the pollinating agent which is more common in flowering plants. Now next thing is students, if I talk about the plants or the flowering plants which uses wind as a pollinating agent mostly is grasses. So in grasses wind pollination is quite common. So wind pollination is commonly seen in grasses. Next, let us talk about water pollination. Okay. So see students, flowering plants or examples of such flowering plants which utilizes water as a pollinating agents. If you ask me the example, they are very simple, also given in NCERT, that are Vallisneria and Hydrilla, Zostera. So see students, Vallisneria and Hydrilla are those flowering plants which utilize water as the pollinating agent. And where do they grow? They grow in fresh water. Where do they grow? They grow in fresh water. Talking about Zostera, Zostera is a flowering plant which grows in marine environment. So, it grows in marine water and uses water as a pollinating agent. Marine water. So, these are the important examples given in NCERT related to the plants that uses water as a pollinating agent. Very, very important, you got to remember this. See students, there is a point over here, very important fact. Please listen carefully. Whenever you think about aquatic plants, right? So, if somebody asks you that what do you think, which one from this, right? Which one would be in abiotic pollinating agents I am talking about, what do you think, which one will be the most common pollinating agent used by aquatic plants? So, if somebody asks you, what will immediately click in your mind? Just give it a try, just think over this. So, obviously, I know whenever somebody asks you this question, the obvious answer that will flash in your brain will be that yes, it is an aquatic plant. So, obviously, water should be used or utilized as a pollinating agent. But my dear students, that is not the case. Listen the fact very carefully, even given in your NCERT textbook. It is that most of the aquatic plant do not use water as a pollinating agent. Very, very important, right? If you ask me example of such aquatic plants who do not uses water as a pollinating agent are water hyacinth and water lily. So, water hyacinth, water lily are such aquatic plants, they are growing in water, but they do not use water as a pollinating agent. Now, the second question is, if they are aquatic, they are growing in water, right, or in aqueous environment, still they are not using water as the pollinating agent. So, what exactly is the agent of pollination in such plants, right? So, the answer is students, plants like water hyacinth and water lily grow above the surface of the water, right, and wind or insects are used as a pollinating agent in them. Got it? So, aquatic plants like water hyacinth or water lily use wind or insects for pollination. Got it? Any doubt till now? I hope this point is clear to all of you that for all the plants that are growing in aqueous environment, it is not the case that all will use water as a pollinating agent. Even the fact is majority of them will use wind or insects like like seen in water hyacinth and water lily, right? And the example of water pollinated plants are Vallisneria, Hydrilla and Zostera, right? Now listen carefully students, there is one more fact over here that you need to understand is that the pollen grain coming in contact to the stigma is actually a chance factor when we talk about both the cases of abiotic agents like wind and water. When wind and water, okay, are used as a pollinating agents, so the chance that pollen grain will come in contact to the stigma is actually, the probability is actually low, right, because there is no definite path right? So pollen grains will be released from anther in water or in air, right? Now imagine how much can be the possibility or probability of these pollen grains who are using wind and water as a pollinating agent that they can finally land on the stigma, right? The probability is quite low. Now to compensate such loss of the pollen grain, what is the adaptation that such plants develop in them who uses water or wind as a pollinating agent? The obvious adaptation that they have developed in them is they produce pollen grains in enormous amount. So when pollen grains are produced in enormous amount, hence what they can do by doing this or by adapting such a character, in this way they can actually compensate that loss of pollen grain, and finally if I say enormous amount of pollen grains are released from that X plant, there is a chance that at least little will reach to their destination, that is the stigma, right? I hope this much is clear to all of you. Anyone, any doubts? Please feel free to ask. I always appreciate doubts and questions, because whenever you think, only then you can come across questions, and asking question is a very, very good habit. So try to ask questions related to this topic. Yes students, any doubt till now? When you ask questions students, that means you are an active listener, right? So show me that you are an active listener by asking questions. Okay, so even during the lecture, if anyone come across any doubt, any question, do post in the live chat section. Next is what we have to discuss is about, anemophily. What is anemophily students? Anemophily means when air or wind is used as a pollinating agent. So what is anemophily? Anemophily means when wind is used as pollinating agents. So what is anemophily students? Anemophily means when wind or air is used as a pollinating agent, and there is a characteristic that is seen in the plants that uses wind as a pollinating agent. What is that? See this beautiful image of a plant that uses wind or air as a pollinating agent. So what is a characteristic that is seen in the flowers of wind pollinated plants? Can you observe and tell me? Try to observe this flower of that wind pollinated plant. So see students, in wind pollinated plants, what happens, flowers are actually packed in an inflorescence and they have well exposed stamen. So what you can see, this is a structure where you can see that flowers are compactly arranged in an inflorescence, making whole structure more visible, right? And in them the stamens are quite well exposed, so that when the stamens will come in contact with the wind, the pollen grains can easily be carried along with the wind and try to reach to the destination, that is stigma. Clear? Let us see what I have to show next. Next we have to discuss about the characteristics of wind pollinated flowers, right? So what are the adaptations or what are the characteristics that a plant or flowers of wind pollinated plants possess so that they can utilize air or wind as a pollinating agent in more effective way? So see, these are the characteristics that you will see in wind pollinated flower. So very first characteristic that I want to discuss with you is about pollen grains. So what do you think? Okay, let's do an exercise. Let's try to think collectively. What could be the characteristics of pollen grains that uses, or what could be the characteristics of a flower that uses wind as a pollinating agent? See, if I talk about pollen grains, and if wind has to carry these pollen grains, what do you think? What should be the physical nature of such pollen grains? Such pollen grains need to be small. Can you imagine wind can carry with it large objects? Can you really imagine? No. So, wind is quite light. So, only if a substance is lighter in weight, it can be easily carried through the or via wind, right? So, if pollen grain wants to be carried via wind, they need to be small, they need to be light, they need to be dry, they need to be non-sticky. Only then they can be easily carried by the wind. So, pollen grains need to be small, pollen grains need to be dry, pollen grains need to be light, pollen grains need to be non-sticky. Correct? Any doubt? Right? Next, flowers that uses wind as pollinating agents, generally how they are. If you observe the wind pollinated flowers, they are generally colorless, odorless, nectarless. Can you imagine why wind pollinated flowers are colorless, odorless, nectarless? Anyone? Give it a try, give it a thought that why exactly? Anyone? Okay, let me give you a hint. Try to think in this way that what is the requirement to have colorful flowers or fragrant flowers, right, or flower with full of nectar. What is the reason to possess such characters inside a flower? If you think, if you can imagine the reason, you can very easily try to make out that why in wind pollinated flowers nectar, odor and color is absent. Anyone? Come on, give it a thought. Yes. So, see, what happens is color, nectar, fragrance, all these characters are needed in such flowers which uses biotic agents for pollination, right? Biotic agents like insects, like animals. Why? Because insects and animals, they have senses, right? And since they possess sensory organs in their body, they can perceive nectar, fragrance and color as a stimulus, and they can get attracted towards the flower, right? Simple. But when we talk about abiotic agents like wind, do you think wind possesses senses that it can take color, nectar or fragrance as a stimulus? No, na? For wind or color, nectar, fragrance doesn't even matter because it is a non-living object. I hope everyone got the point over here that why wind pollinated or even water pollinated, both, because both wind and water are non-living objects, right? So, I hope it is clear that why in wind and water pollinated flowers color, nectar, fragrance are absent, because for them these things or these characters doesn't matter. They cannot give any response to such, they do not possess such sensory organs to give response to such stimuli, right? Such stimuli can be perceived only by living organisms. So, it will be prominent, such characters, odor, presence of nectar, presence of fragrance, presence of colors, such characters will be considerable only in or will be desirable only in plants that uses biotic agents for pollination, right? Let us come back. So, when we talk about flowers, flowers of wind pollinated plants are colorless, odorless and nectarless, right? Let us see stamen. Stamen of wind pollinated flowers need to be well exposed so that wind can easily carry the pollen grains with them. So, stamens need to be well exposed, giving chance to the wind so that wind can take pollen grains with it. Stigma. Stigma of wind pollinated flowers need to be feathery. Why it needs to be feathery? So that when pollen grain comes in contact with the stigma, it can trap it, it can hold it so that pollen grain can germinate and further processes or events can take place. Next is number of ovules. So, generally students, this is a characteristic seen in the wind pollinated flowers that in their ovary single ovule is found. In their ovary single ovules in ovary are found, and this is a very important fact students. In previous history of NEET, many times question was framed on this fact. So, this is very important. Repeatedly in the history of NEET, it was seen that NEET was asking question based on this fact that in wind pollinated flowers their ovary possess single ovules. Very important, right? Any doubts till now? Anyone? 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 So, Sunil is asking that can we say pollination did not depends on the species interaction. Wait for some time, Sunil. When I am going to close this lecture, I will discuss one important topic in it, right? And I am sure you will get your answer over there. So, wait, just hold yourself for few more minutes. I am going to come on this question. Wait. Okay. So, next thing. Next is, this is all about I wanted to discuss in Anemophily. What is Anemophily? Anemophily is a type of pollination in which wind is used. Yes, wind or air is used as pollinating agents. Clear? Now see students here. Next is what? Next is hydrophily. What is hydrophily? In hydrophily, water is used as a pollinating agent. Water used as pollinating agent, right? And this hydrophily can be subdivided into two parts. On what basis? Basis is very simple students. The basis is when pollination is taking place on the surface of the water. It is termed as epihydrophily. And when pollination in a plant is taking place under the surface of the water, it is termed as hypohydrophily, right? So, epihydrophily and hypohydrophily. What is epihydrophily? Pollination taking place on the surface of water. What is hypohydrophily? Pollination taking place under water, right? Clear? Now, let us see some more facts about epi and hypohydrophily. We will start with epihydrophily. So, not to forget, What is epihydrophily? That means pollination will take place on the surface of the water. Let us see how and in which plant. So, see here students, the most classical example and also given in NCERT for epihydrophily is Vallisneria. What you can see over here is a beautiful flower of Vallisneria, right? What happens in this? See, this is what, this is a female flower of Vallisneria. Now, what I will do is, I will zoom out this female flower, right, in the next image. But before that, I want to tell you something, that is, in Vallisneria, the stalk of the flower is quite long, and with the help of this long stalk, the female flower of Vallisneria reaches to the surface of the water, where its pollination will take place. And not to forget, Vallisneria is an example of water pollinated plants. So, obviously, the agent of pollination will be water, and that is why we are discussing it. Next, see here. So, what is this case? This is this female flower. What I have done over here, I have zoomed it, right? And this female flower, you can see, is lying where? It is above the surface of the water. So, what is this? This is the surface of the water, and because of this long stalk, the female flower has reached to the surface of the water, right? And in the vicinity or in the surrounding of this female flower, what you can see is male flower, or you can say pollen grains, because male flower, the objective of male flower is to carry pollen grains to the stigma, right. So, over the surface of the water, what you can see is a female flower, and in the vicinity of the female flower are these male flowers or pollen grains. Now, what happens students in Vallisneria? As I said, because of the long stalk, female flower will reach to the surface of the water, and the pollen grains will be released on the surface of the water, and through passive water currents, these pollen grains will try to reach to the stigma of the female flower, and some of them will be able to successfully reach to the stigma of the female flower, and hence will pollinate the female flower, right. So, this is how epihydrophily takes place inside Vallisneria. Clear? Any doubt till now? No? Good. So, now next is hypohydrophily. The most common example also given in your NCERT, the plant that exhibit hypohydrophily is Zostera, right. So, hypohydrophily is seen in most of the marine grasses. Example is Zostera. What happens in them? In them students, the female flower will not reach to the surface of the water. That was the case in epihydrophily, right. So, just opposite to epihydrophily will be hypohydrophily. In hypohydrophily, the female flower will remain submerged, right, inside the water. Clear? Now, next point that you need to understand is, in these plants, the pollen grains will be ribbon-like. They will be long and ribbon-like and will be released inside the water through passive water currents. And finally, some of these pollen grains will be able to reach the stigma of the female flower, which is actually submerged inside the water, right. So, this is how hypohydrophily takes place in marine grasses like Zostera, right. Any doubt till now? Tell me. Any doubt? Okay. So, there is one more thing that you need to understand over here is, okay, I can write this for you also, that female flowers will be submerged inside water, and the next is pollen grains will be ribbon-like in Zostera. and pollen grains in such plants will be protected from wetting with the help of a mucilaginous cover, right. This is also an important fact that you should remember. Now, next what I here to discuss is about zoophily. What is zoophily? Zoophily means when the pollinating agents are animals, right, and there are various animals that act as pollinating agents in flowering plants. Let us see. The very first type of zoophily is entomophily. In entomophily, insects are used as pollinating agents. In ornithophily, birds are used as pollinating agents. In chiropterophily, bats are used as pollinating agents. In ophiophily, snakes are used as pollinating agents. And last, malacophily, snails are used as pollinating agents. So, zoophily means when pollinating agents first of all are biotic and in them animals, right. Next is entomophily. What is entomophily? Entomophily is when insects are used as pollinating agents. The most common insect pollinators are moth, flies, butterflies, wasps, bees and beetles. In them, students, very important, notice one point that out of these, bee is the most dominant pollinating agents in flowering plants. Very important fact. Please remember this. Let us see what are the characteristics of insect pollinated flowers. Insect pollinated flowers are generally large, colorful, fragrant and rich in nectar. I have already discussed this point when I was explaining why wind pollinated flowers do not possess nectar, fragrance, odor or even why they are colorless. So, this point is clear. Next is these flowers, if the insect pollinated flowers are small in size, they will compactly arrange themselves into an inflorescence. So, they become prominent, they become visible to the pollinators. Next is if flies and beetles are used as pollinating agent, then they are attracted by foul odor and not by fragrance. Important fact. And last, the floral rewards. See students, if these insect pollinated plants want to ensure or maintain or sustain the visit of such pollinators, they got to reward their pollinator with something, right. And generally the usual rewards that these insect pollinated flowers give to their insect pollinators is nectar and pollen grain. Important. So, nectar and pollen grains are usual floral rewards given by insect pollinated flowers to their insect pollinators. Simple. Next is students, there are not only pollen grains and nectar that can be used as floral rewards, although they are the most common and usual one, but there are certain other floral rewards also that are given by these insect pollinated flowers to their pollinators. What are they? One of them can be giving a safe place to lay eggs, and such thing is seen in plants of Anemophily. In plant of Anemophily, which is actually 6 feet in height, very important fact. If you see this flower, it itself has 6 feet height. So, in such flowers, what reward these Anemophily flowers give to their pollinators? They actually provide them a safe place to lay eggs. Next is one more example of a plant which provide safe place to lay egg is seen in yucca plant. See students, there is a mutualistic relationship that exists between yucca plant and Pronuba insect. Pronuba insect is responsible for bringing pollination in flowers of yucca plant. And what does yucca plant in return provide as a reward to Pronuba moth? These yucca plant provide them safe place to lay eggs. And what do you think, what is that safe place they provide? Pronuba insect actually lay egg into the locule of ovary of yucca plant flower, right. So, when the seeds come out, or when seeds get developed, the pronuba, larva of pronuba insects also hatches or comes out from the egg. So, floral reward in yucca plant is providing a safe place to lay egg to its insect pollinator, that is pronuba moth. Okay, so this is the last thing that I want to discuss with you students, and it is pollen or nectar robbers. Listen carefully. There are certain insects which comes to these insect pollinated flowers, utilize their nectar, consume their nectar or pollen grains, but in return do not bring pollination. So, such kind of insects are termed as pollen robbers or nectar robbers, right. So, this is the simple concept that is given in your NCERT, that pollen or nectar robbers are the insects that consume pollen or nectar without bringing pollination, right. Any doubt till now? Okay. So, that is it. Thank you students for staying connected. This is all what I wanted to discuss in today's lecture about agents of pollination. Broadly, I classified these pollinating agents into biotic and abiotic categories, right. So, if you like me and this lecture, give me a thumbs up and do not forget to subscribe Infinity Learn by Sri Chaitanya. Thank you students.